So someone has passed away and you've been named personal representative. The first question that you may be asking yourself is, what exactly does a personal representative do? Today, we're going to explore what that will actually entails and go through some of the differences between being a personal representative and an heir to the estate, because those two things are not the same. My name is Sharon. I'm a real estate broker and CPA with over 25 years experience, and I'm happy to help you better understand this topic. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So a personal representative is a person who is responsible for managing the estate. When someone passes away, everything that they own, everything that they owe, everything related to them financially is a part of an estate. And someone has to be responsible for managing that estate, and that is the personal representative. How do you become a personal representative? It happens in one of two ways. Either you are named in the will as the representative, or you are appointed by the courts in the event that there is no will. Your core duty as a personal representative is making sure that you gather all the assets, everything related to the estate, make sure that you're identifying what those items are, manage the finances, any bills that are related to assets within the estate need to be paid, financial obligations need to be met. As the representative, you're going to be responsible for communicating with the professionals, the estate attorney, if there's a CPA involved, if there's a realtor involved, any of the parties that are the professionals in the transaction, you as a personal representative are going to be responsible for communicating with all of them and making sure that you help to settle the estate. When we've gone through the process and all assets are dispersed as intended, then that is considered settling the estate, and that is your role as a personal representative to help to settle the estate. Now, as I alluded to earlier, a personal representative is different from being an heir to the estate. And so when you are the personal representative, you have a set of duties and some responsibilities that go with that role. And we touched on them a little bit in the previous slide. You manage the process, you have legal responsibilities, you are serving all of the beneficiaries. So a beneficiary or an heir to the estate, your job is to serve them as the personal representative, and you file all the paperwork. You basically are the administrator. You're the person that's making sure that everything keeps moving along in the right and appropriate manner on behalf of the heirs and the estate. When you inherit, or when you're an heir or a beneficiary to an estate, you inherit the assets. You receive distributions if there are distributions to be received, and you have no legal management duties. So you're not responsible for doing any of the duties related to settling the estate or to manage the estate while it's going through the legal process. None of that is your responsibility as an heir, unless you're an heir as well as a personal representative. So that's a very important distinction that you want to make. You want to be clear what your role is. Just because you're inheriting property does not necessarily mean that you are the personal representative with the authority to make decisions related to the property. So you want to make sure that you know exactly what your role is and should be. If there is an estate that you are the personal representative for, and there's real estate that's involved, there are additional duties that you are now going to be responsible for. And one of the primary things that you would be responsible for is making sure that you secure and inspect the property. The biggest issue or the biggest responsibility is making sure that you secure the asset. The next thing that you're going to want to do is verify your insurance coverages. Insurance coverages can lapse on property that is a part of an estate, because if no one is actively managing the finances between the time that the personal representative is appointed or identified and the time that the person passes, the insurance coverage could lapse. You want to make sure that you verify that the coverage is in place. And if it's not in place, make sure that you put coverage in place. You don't want to lose the asset in the event of anything unforeseen, act of God, fire, flood, anything like that. You want to make sure that the asset is protected. You also would be responsible for monitoring utilities and for maintenance of the property. You're going to address repairs. You're going to make sure that the utilities are on. You don't want to be in a situation where there's a small leak, and because there's no electricity, there's no air conditioning, and now you have a mold issue. Your job is to make sure that you're securing the property, you're safeguarding the asset so that it is in its best possible condition, given all the circumstances, to be settled as a part of the estate. And you are going to be communicating with any occupants in the property and coordinating sales the sale of the property, if it's to be sold, or if the property is going to remain as a rental property, you are also going to be coordinating the arrangements with the tenants. So as you can see, there's a property management component that goes along with being a personal representative when you have real estate that's involved. So keep that in mind. Primary responsibility is to protect the asset. You want to make sure that you do everything that's needed to safeguard it and make sure that it is protected. As a personal representative, you also have a fiduciary responsibility. You have an obligation to always act in the best interest of the estate. Your personal benefits or your personal interests will be secondary to what is in the best interest of the estate, always. That is the fiduciary responsibility that you have as a personal representative. You have a duty to act honestly, be fully transparent with all the beneficiaries and the courts. You're also required in this role to make sure that you keep accurate records. Any decisions that are made, any bills that are paid, any transactions, any communications, you want to make sure that you are organized and you keep your accurate records, because you may be called upon to provide them and to produce justification for decisions that have been made. And you want to be able to support it and show that you did conform to your fiduciary responsibilities. You did not renege on your duty. The other responsibility that you have is you are required to avoid self-dealing. Any personal interests, again, must never override the estate's duties. If there is an instance where there is a service to be provided that you can provide and you are interested in doing that, again, in the interest of transparency, that needs to be disclosed and authorized. The best option is to avoid self-dealing if possible, but in the event that you're doing work would be in the best interest of the estate, that needs to be clearly communicated and supported so that there's adequate justification for you using your services as it relates to something related to the estate, and then make responsible decisions. At the end of the day, the question becomes, would a reasonable person make this decision? That is typically the benchmark that is used. Would a reasonable person choose to do this? If the answer is yes, then it's probably a responsible decision. If the answer is no, then you may want to rethink that. You want to make sure that your decision-making is thoughtful. It's not emotional or coming out of anything other than logic and reason. And you always want to stay within the scope of your expertise. So a good general rule is to make sure that you consult a professional and get guidance. Now, as a personal representative, there are some things that you are going to come across, some common challenges that families face. Many times you're going to come across disagreement among the heirs, among the beneficiaries. That is typically quite commonplace. The more beneficiaries, the more likely that there will be some family disagreement. Some people want to do one thing, other people want to do another thing. So that is a typical challenge that you should expect to face if you are a personal representative. In many cases, you have out-of-state beneficiaries. The deceased was located in one state and their beneficiaries and their heirs are in another state. So there's coordinating communication long distance. That is something that you can reasonably expect to have happen as well. When there's property involved, oftentimes the property is in poor condition, as I said, depending upon the amount of time that has lapsed between the death or just the ability of the person to adequately maintain their estate. Maybe they died recently, but they were very ill and unable to take care of responsibilities for an extended period. That can translate into the property being in poor condition and them not having really organized records. You may have to do some work in terms of gathering information, gathering statements, gathering data to make sure that you have a full financial picture of what it is that you're working on. Something else that's typical is there can be delays in the probate process. It's procedural, so there are some steps that you have to take. There are no real shortcuts. So if you're going through probate, then there could very well be delays. Keep that in mind. In the meantime, there may also be pressure, financial pressure, to get the estate settled quickly. In cases where there's not adequate liquid resources to be able to take care of financial responsibilities like utilities or maintenance or like association fees if the property is in an association, those things create some financial pressure because those bills have to be paid and the estate may not have the resources until everything's been settled. So making sure that you have the right team to give you the right advice to navigate that process is absolutely critical because you want to make sure that you are doing the right thing and getting the best result. Now, one of the things to keep in mind if there's property involved, real estate involved, is that you have three options. You can sell it, rent it, or hold it. Holding, I'll start at the holding, the last one first. Holding could be a situation where there is an emotional attachment to the property. Maybe it was a family home. Maybe it was something where some or all of the beneficiaries grow up and they want to make sure that it stays in the family. Someone wants to move into it. That is always an option. That's always a possibility. That may be what they want to do. Selling may be the only option depending upon how the beneficiaries feel about the property and whether or not there is a need to generate liquidity, generate cash to be able to meet obligations. Selling may be the only option. Under selling, though, keep in mind that could involve one or more of the beneficiaries buying out other beneficiaries. So it doesn't have to be sold to an independent third party. Same is true for holding. When you have a situation where maybe one or more of the heirs want to keep the property, but everyone is not of the same mind, if they have the resources, they do have the ability, or they could have the ability to buy out the other parties, and then they would essentially own the property, in which case you would need a valuation, and there's some resources that you would want to make sure that you tap into to get the right value and make sure that everyone is being fairly represented and fairly treated. And of course, the option of keeping the property if everyone is of the same mind to keep the property, but they're going to rent it and have it perform as an investment asset, that could also be an option. So there may be a need as a personal representative for you to do some temporary management or oversee some temporary management, depending upon the decision that the beneficiaries express an interest in doing. Again, they don't want to sell the property and they have resources to be able to address or come up with another solution. As the personal representative, you would be involved in that coordination and involved in those communications to come up with the ultimate disposition of the estate. Some of the people who would be a critical part of the process, and you as a personal representative would want to make sure that you tap into is one, a probate attorney. You are going to need legal advice. I can tell you that I am not an attorney. You will need legal advice to guide you. This is a complicated process. Make sure that you have retained the services of the appropriate professionals, and a probate attorney is at the top of the list. You're probably going to need, depending upon the size of the estate and the complexity of it, the CPA or tax advice. Again, your goal is you're making sure that the estate gets settled with the maximum benefit to the beneficiaries, whether that's you or not. So you most likely will need a CPA or tax advice. If there's real estate involved that you're considering to either sell or hold, but allocate among different parties, you may need the services of a real estate broker to be able to get a valuation and talk about market conditions so that you can have a sense of what you're working with in terms of size of the estate. As we discussed earlier, if the decision is to rent the property or hold on to it over a period of time while the probate process is going on or while the estate is being sorted out, you may need a property manager as well to take care of the day-to-day details and responsibilities. And you are also absolutely going to need an insurance advisor to make sure that the property has adequate coverage and that the assets are protected as it relates to insurance and anything unforeseen. This is your A team. These are the people that you need to be consulting with, talking to make sure that you get adequate and appropriate advice so that you can fulfill your responsibilities as the representative, as a fiduciary, and do what is in the best interest of the estate. Again, the goal is not for you to operate outside your area of competence. If you are not familiar with any of the roles or you don't have the skill set involved in making decisions in a specific area, the expectation is that you will seek the appropriate professional and get the guidance that you need to make the best decisions. At the end of the day, your role is to move forward responsibly and to protect the estate and the beneficiaries. I hope you found this video helpful. To access additional resources to help you as a personal representative or to schedule a complimentary phone consultation with me, please visit my website at simplyaskSharon.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.